Although it may be that an editorialist like myself or um, somebody influenced by my views or views like mine could possibly have a role in um, future diplomatic normality, which can help unravel the quagmire of historic friction that exists between various nation states who, after all, should be trying harder to accommodate one another. But the neo-Nazi alliance that Paul McCartney, Roger Waters, and the British Empire have put together with the help of Biden and Obama, online scrutiny of me and the various perfectly well balanced people in the online community. When I say perfectly well balanced, I also mean the leaders of so called adversarial nations. There are no clear and present Adolf Hitlers on the scene. All of them are balanced people. It has nothing to do with promoting or adopting my views as some kind of biblical statement from the American Oz of Hollywood. To the contrary, they set about to marginalize and humiliate me. And they've set up a little game of Pavlovian options to show me be my guest attitude about diplomatic ideas. Here is how to resolve it. Forgive that we tortured you. Forgive that we committed atrocity. Forgive that we hate you. Forgive that we lied about you. Be my guest. There it is. There's your tabula rasa, queer bait. I don't understand how anyone could miss just the sheer level of abuse that was involved in what they did. One of the levels of abuse pertains to the idea that, well, in Afghanistan, families are so poor that they um, have to sell their daughters. It's important to realize that this crowd glorifies that sort of thing. Throughout the Two Virgins ordeal, they were bragging of having taken away my girlfriend through deceit, of having exacted tribute in the forms of kinship, rape. They put out a film called Anna and the King, which has a woman who's overpowered by the king, and she is torn from her Buddhist lover. And in giving tribute to the king, she finds her womanhood. It's not all that different from the spoils, conquest, domination of Genghis Khan's legacy of extorting tribute from women. Pornography doesn't lead men to sell their daughters from poverty. Pornography is forbidden in those states. So, if they're looking for a world without pornography, you wonder why they went about it the way they did with the promotion of pornography. And it's a form of militant feminism. The magnitude of the hypocrisy that's written large over the entire enterprise suggests nothing so much as the entertainment system. And that's what needs to be evaluated in the situation is the entertainment system. I don't have anything against any of the people who are trying reasonably to surmount the puppeteering that we're dealing with in the neocons in Washington, D.C. But you can't dismiss all of the criticisms that are made of foreign powers. Some of them are reactionary to being abused, and that has to be entertained and understood. The climate justice idea is certainly a very enterprising one. If you love the planet, invest in its restoration. Some of the anger that the fossil fuel industry, as one climate activist says, seems to feed the anger, seems to be an expression of the anger, might abate somewhat. Educated values, it's if you have a class full of people who enjoy seeing someone get beaten up, someone is going to get beaten up. If you can have a class full of people who scorn the resort to cruelty as childish, children are going to protect each other and make life easier for adults who have to manage the growing pains of young people. Intelligence among the young people is a good idea to cultivate. It's good that there's young people who are activists, who are engaging in ecological idea of social justice. These are important issues to consider and think about and look into in terms of cultural competence, what they call sometimes intersectionalities. I haven't mastered the meaning of that word, but I did see the legacy of the inventors of that word, and they were exacting tribute at the crossroads in a Pussy Bowl board game. It wasn't consensual based on honor code of consent. They scorned and hated the idea of mutual consent so much that they castrated me for refusing to date rape. That's where the language system, the intersectionalities comes from. The spinner beanie crowd from the Green Party who saw social equity and mandatory miscegenation. Yusuf Dorjammer was a complicated structure of preying on a neuroplasm, getting even for World War II, and calling dibs on Midori Goto. And the people who stagecrafted this are 79-year-old womanizers in the prime of health, like Mick Jagger. Considered all the ins and outs, discussed it with paranormalists, rich fascists who were black, just happened to be black, from Africa. And they come up with this idea of intersectionalities as a concept of promoting the ARC system of Tamo de Jong's Grangan Society, which I think was a waste of 50 years to make money for the fossil fuel industry. The same people who put out Flame Over Africa. I mean, if you do your homework in your cosmopolitan anthropology, that doesn't mean that the people in the movement of who are using a term like intersectionality realize that. I'm sure that they don't. I'm sure that none of them want to use peer pressure to tell their friends that they have to be lesbian or they have to sleep with this guy or that guy. Although there were young girls doing that sort of thing in Pittsburgh and NAMBLA. Some of the pimps of NAMBLA were 12, 11, 12, 13-year-old violent girls who were groomed in Hollywood, who were groomed in hardcore mentalities. You do have to be very careful. And the reason why I don't see an immediate connection between trafficking and pornography is because I've heard women who work in pornography who credit themselves as liberationists. Don't tell me what to do, moms. So I think the whole thing has to be carefully put into context. There are no bumper stickers that fit all. One size never fits all. There are all sorts of contours that these issues have to be taken into consideration with. when you draw generalities, you become too ideological. And there's trigger wires all over the place. Ideology is a minefield. The way to diffuse that minefield is to be less ideological. Start with understanding the context that things happen in and look carefully at what it is that you think you would accept being asked of you, as opposed to what you want to ask of other people, and work together to normalize consideration for one another. My protest letter is an old story, but it was reaction to being told to do something that went against my grain is fundamentally and ethically wrong, an anti-virtue. To force yourself on someone without their consent is an anti-virtue. They were saying it was implied consent. And there was a refusal to understand that they were the ones who were making the claim that it was implied consent. And I was saying, I didn't think so. Stop breaking my heart about it. I fault the establishment of Seattle and Pittsburgh. They shouldn't be listening to these people who have these spinny beanies on. Yes, you can implant something that causes such torment that a person eventually has a pressure breakdown where they scream and yell and cry from the suffering that you're inflicting. What does that have to do with violence? It's the reverse of violence. It means being violated. These people were using trickery. Peter Gabriel was calling rapid eye movement evaluation of an impacted neuroplasm proof of what they puppeteered and hypnotized as defiant trespass. And nobody said that's wrong. Nobody said that is a cruel and misguided thing to do. And he was working with an out-of-state prison psychiatrist, and nobody said what a terrible experiment. And they said, go out and prove your compassion, queer ball. Go to a firing squad in Pyongyang or something. I mean, they say everybody knows that the girl that I love deeply as a comrade in this world was Korean. From the poor, these people in North Korea are just the poverty stricken. They have pride. They don't want to be dictated to by the United States. If you work from that point of departure, you have a diplomatic potential to reconcile the situation with those people. I don't understand why that isn't obvious, but it's not disproven by this theory of the nature of reality that leads to negligence where bridges collapse and all this other stuff that comes out of the hardcore let's go out and fight them crowd. And they need people who they look up to help them calm down. I mean, eternity is around us for a long time. We're part of eternity. We can afford a little bit of patience. We can afford to put the brake on fossil fuel industries for a while. We can afford to be less zealously determined to burn every molecule of oil in sight. We can afford to wait and save something for the future. I don't understand why that isn't obvious, but since it's not, I think I'd like to be helpful in making clear the case for it. And please don't traffic the idea that home invasion is normal. It really isn't. Yoko Ono doesn't have a case. She imposed this thing on me as a performance art statement, as some sort of satiricon about her celebrity husband's magic powers or something. It's really not all that respectable of a thing to be just ignoring and showing obeisance to.